Good morning, students. Today we are going to do this lesson number 5. Should wizard hit mommy, from our supplementary reader Vistas. This chapter moves on the storyline of an animal who is always in a problem, and the problem is being solved by the wise owl. And the wise owl sends the problem is actually solved by the wizard who is a magician. We understand with this word wizard is a magician, and the story moves from an animal with the problem, and the problematic animal or the animal with the problem moves to the owl, goes to the owl, knocks the door of the owl, and the owl sends him to the wizard, and wizard finally solves the problem. So should wizard hit mommy is the, and there's a question mark in the opening. And if you see your textbook, I wish all the students must keep their books open. So keep your books open, and you see the small small picture of a girl who is thoughtful, who is lost in her thoughts, and she's thinking continuously something. So should wizard hit mommy? The title of the lesson is Should Wizard Hit Mommy? So there's a question. I laid emphasis on the point that there is a question mark. So it is to the readers. It is for the character Joe, the character Jack. So there's Joe and Jack. Joe is the daughter and Jack is the father. So Joe here is the daughter who is listening to the story being delivered by the father, or conveyed there's a trend. So the storyline is such. Here's a story about the worldview of a little child and the difficult moral questions she raises during the story session with her father. Now, there was a trend in the family which they had developed recently of telling the stories. The father had started telling the stories to the daughter. And this story was the story of an animal whose name was always Roger. And Roger had a problem. And Roger's problem, the main character used to be Roger, and Roger had a problem which was taken to the wise owl. And there was a circle, like the owl used to solve the problem by guiding the animal to the wizard. And now the question, that should wizard hit mommy or mommy should hit the wizard? So there is a point for the readers to decide. Readers, there is a point to decide whose perspective is appropriate or should be followed. So before we answer all these questions, let us move towards or into the story. In the evenings and for Saturday naps like today's, Jack told his daughter Jo a story out of his head. This was a custom in their house to tell the stories, because this custom started 2 years ago when Jo was only 2 years old. Now she was 4 years old. So 2 years have almost, 2 years have been passed. This storytelling cult trend was going on in their family. Each new story was a slight variation. And every time the animal was Roger. And Roger had a problem, and the problem was taken to Owl. And finally, the Owl used to go to the wizard, and the wizard used to solve the problem and used to charge a nominal fee. That was again a problem for the Roger animal to pay, and the solution was also provided by the magician, the wizard. And this way the story used to move. This custom began when she was 2 and was itself now nearly 2 years old. So this is the basic line of the story. There's a story within a story. We are reading the story of Joe and Jack. And Jack is telling the story, and the story which is being told is the part of the story. And each new story was a slight variation in the basic tale. A small creature, usually named Roger, a small creature, usually named Roger, sometimes Roger Fish, Roger Squirrel, Roger Chipmunk, and he had some problem and went with it to the wise old owl. The owl told him to go to the wizard, and the wizard performed a magic spell that solved the problem. This we have already discussed, and demanding in payment a number of pennies greater than the number that Roger creature had. So every time the problem was that the little amount the animal would have, and then he will be guided, or she'll be, or whosoever it is will be guided whatever animal, it will be guided by the magician, and the problem will be solved. Another problem, the next problem of paying the amount. Then Roger was so happy, and every time Roger animal used to become very happy and used to go home with other creatures. He used to play and went home to his mother just in time, hearing the train doing whistling or whistling sounds that brought, with the whistling sounds that brought his daddy home. And the story by Jack was ended by describing their supper. Every time Jack used to teach her daughter the supper of various, the eating habits, the food of various animals by telling the supper. Working this way through this scheme was especially fatiguing. Like, it was very tiring. It was very tiresome for father to tell the stories, but his interest was also there in dramatizing, enacting, putting special effects in that story. And on Saturday, especially fatiguing on Saturday, it was tiring on Saturdays, because Joe never fell asleep now. The children, when they grow, they don't feel like sleeping. Then they do their pranks and they play and they do a lot of all unimportant things, but they do not sleep. So this was the problem. And the activity of storytelling, which was considered important for making the child here in this particular family to sleep, was going futile. Now it was not very, very effective. The girl, not so little anymore, the bumps, she used to create some sounds and used to bump her feet, and she used to give some reflections under the covers, covers that she was covering with the blanket maybe, and some or the other time the sunlight that used to fall on her face, she used to look all the time out of the pillow, and in the pillow, and the way her fat face deep in the pillow shone in the sunlight, sifting through the drawn shades. It did not seem fantastic that some magic would occur and Joe would sleep. Her brother Bobby was 2. She had a younger brother, Bobby, who was 2 years old and already asleep with his bottle. Jack asked, "Who shall the story be about today?" Now, Jack, the father, used to take the opinions of the daughter, and this way their interaction was wonderful. Roger, and the girl, he said Roger every time because the animal was the same, the Roger. And this time Joe squeezed her eyes, and as I said, her reflections were very, very important, and they used to connect with the narrators, that is the Jack's ideas and notions. And she smiled to be thinking, and she was thinking, and the picture on the top of the story is Joe is depicted thinking something. So the picture, the title, and now the episodes of the story, we'll find them connected to each other. Her eyes opened, her mother's blue. So here, her mother's blue, there's a line that Roger, when she squeezed her eyes shut and smiled to be thinking, and she was thinking that she pretended that she's thinking. As the small children, they do a lot of tantrums, and their ways are their beautiful reflections. So her eyes opened, her mother's blue, and skunk, she said firmly. And now this time the animal would be skunk, a new animal they must talk about, which has been the animal which has been taught to her in her nursery, at her nursery school too. Having a fresh hero momentarily was a point of excitement for Jack too. And this stirred Jack's enthusiasm also to take this skunk. A skunk is an animal that is quite bad smelling, foul smelling, and moreover, maybe it is its adaptation to protect itself. If we'll find out, we'll come to know that skunks are from weasel family and they smell very bad. So having a fresh hero was an excitement, or it was an exciting thing for the father also. So, all right, he said, once upon a time in the deep dark woods, there was a tiny little creature. So he started narrating his tale that once upon a time there was an animal who was very tiny, but whose name was Roger Skunk, and he smelled very bad. So in the story of Jack and Joe, the story of skunk has started, which is being narrated by the father, Jack, to little Joe, who's 4 years old, and it's their custom since 2 years back. Or for 2 years, they have been continuing with this custom of telling the story, and Joe being a wonderful listener with dramatizing the effects, the reflections. Now, once upon a time in the deep dark woods, there was a tiny little creature and he smelled very bad. He smelled so bad that none of the other little woodland creatures would play with him. So what is the problem of Roger? Now we come to, we discussed the storyline that Roger had a problem, and the problem of Roger Skunk here is, what is the problem? Bad smell, foul smell. So this bad smell, and he was called as Stinky Skunk. His name was being referred as Stinky Skunk, which made him often cry. And he used to cry and cry. Now, the Stinky Skunk animal, Roger Skunk, he used to cry. Jack continued with jest, remembering certain humiliations of his own childhood. Our experiences are very important. When we do something, they are being reflected. So he was doing the work of telling the story. So his own humiliations, he's going back into his memory lane of his childhood, and certain, as per the author, some humiliations of his are being reflected. All of the other animals would cry and they say, oh, here comes Roger, Stinky Skunk, and they would run away. And Roger Skunk would stand there all alone, and two little round tears would fall from his eyes. So now the corners of Joe's mouth drooped down. And so Joe used to she used to reflect those things. Her expressions would convey that she's imbibing, she's enjoying the story of the characters. And she used to give those reflections wholeheartedly, and this made the father more enthusiastic. So there was bit dramatization of the story by both the listener as well as the teller. Teller, the father Jack, and the listener, little Joe. And won't he see the owl? She used to interrupt and guide her father also in between. Won't he see the owl? So the entry of the owl has been done as per the storyline, that Joe, the animal would have the problem and the animal would go to the owl. So Roger Skunk here, the fresh hero who has been selected by both the father and the daughter, now will go to the owl. So she interrupts and guides the father, that won't he see the owl? And sitting on the bed beside Jack felt the covers tug as her legs switched tensely, and her movements, her gestures could convey very well, did convey very well, that she was wonderfully pleased and enjoying the story. And he himself was pleased with such opinions and reflections of the daughter. So he was telling, and he was also happy that he's telling something true, something she must know. All parents, they feel wonderful when they tell their children something real, something important, something which is very crucial in the process of growing, and had no wish to hurry on with the story. But downstairs, a chair scraped. There was now another character who is being discussed, that is Claire. Claire is being discussed here as a woman who is working down on the ground floor or downstairs, and the furniture noises, moving of the furniture could be heard upstairs. And Claire was painting the woodwork down. Well, he walked along very sadly and came to a very big tree. And in the tip top of the tree was an enormous wise old owl. So there's as I said, the story is moving along with the story of Jack and Joe's family story, as well as the story in a story that is Skunk's story. So now there was the owl being introduced. And good, Mr. Owl, Roger Skunk said, all the little animals run away from me because I smell so bad. Now Skunk has gone to owl as per the line of the story, as per the plot of the story. So you do, the owl said. Very bad smelly you are, bad smelling animal. What can I do for you? Roger Skunk said, and he cried very hard. He should have told what he could have done for him, what the owl should do for him, but he cried and cried. Now Joe used to guide in between. The wizard, and Joe shouted and sat right up, and little golden book spilled from the bed. Now, Joe, Daddy is telling the story. Or do you want Daddy to tell the story? So there's conversation going on between daughter and father. No, you, me. She says, No, you tell the story to me. Then lie down and be sleepy. So this activity, which was done to make the small girl sleep, was going on futile, because more of the storytelling, interesting storytelling with all the dramatic effects was going on wonderfully. Who would like to sleep? Who will wish to sleep? When they both were interested in, one was interested in telling the story and the other was dramatizing the story, and both were involved in that drama, of stories. And there was as if two things have combined together. Then lie down and be sleepy. Well, and the story used to move. The owl thought and thought. At last, he said, the owl will send the animal to the wizard. Why don't you go and see the wizard? Daddy, what? There are few dialogues, Daddy, and there's a question mark. What? Are magic spells real? Now, there was another phase when she has become 4 years. There was another phase that was of asking questions as younger children and all the students, children, they ask questions to their parents and teachers. And we all have grown with this inquisitivity, which is the, we call as curiosity as the mother of invention, the necessity as the mother of invention. And with this inquisitiveness, we keep on growing and growing. So she used to ask the questions from the mother and the father. And when the questions were not, when some things were told by the father, she used to go and confirm from the mother. And when some of the things were told by the mother, the little Jo, this little girl used to go to the father. So she asked, are magic spells real? This was a new phase in the life of the, a reality phase, a new phase in the life of the small girl. When he told her, when her mother told her spiders eat bugs, she turned to her mother. Sorry, when the father told her that spider eat bugs, spiders, they eat bugs, she used to confirm all these things from the mother. Do they really? And when Claire told her God was in the sky and all around them, she turned to her father and insisted with a sly and eager smile, with a secret smile, is he really? Is God there really for us? And this was a reality phase which has emerged recently. As I said, inquisitivity, curiosity actually leads us to new openings, went for new openings, and so many things keep taking place in our lives as openers, as beginners, as learners. So this was, they are real in stories, and the father used to answer all her questions this way. So let us recapitulate what we did today. That is, should wizard hit mommy? Or we actually understood, tried to look into the title of the story, that is, should wizard hit mommy? Or another other side of the question can be, mommy should hit wizard. Moreover, the trend of storytelling with all its drama effects and the basic plot of the story, that the animal would have a problem and the problem will take him to owl, and the owl will, the problem will take him to the owl, and the owl will guide him to the wizard, and the wizard will finally solve the problem. And we will be doing this in the next class tomorrow. We'll continue this tomorrow, children, in the next session, that how the problem is being solved and what are the perspectives of adults and perspectives of children are being discussed and how they prove important. There are basic important two characters, that is Jack and Joe. Jack is 4 years old and Joe is 4 years old, and Jack is her father, who is actually interested in telling the stories which he has developed recently. 2 years have been passed with this way of making Joe sleep. She is now not interested in sleeping, but yet the stories are part of their lives. Thank you. We'll continue tomorrow.